Thank you so much, Carla, for leading this session. And thank you so much, David from Ripped Orange in New Zealand, who's kindly providing this educational element. Oh, goodness, what are you doing, Cass? I'm going on mute. I'm handing over.
Thanks, Heather. And hello, everybody. I've missed a lot of you this week. I've had a bit going on in my own life, so I've missed my 4 o'clock chats, and so it's good to see some of your faces. I particularly was interested in this topic, spoke to Heather about it, because we use SharePoint to some degree, but it's all self-taught, and like many that have probably have it, aren't using it to the best of its ability and using the functionality. And so I really appreciate David coming in and chatting with us about SharePoint today. So thank you, David, again for joining us. And do you want to just, I know you've got a presentation slide deck, but do you want to just introduce yourself and...
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Sorry, I'm just struggling with moving a couple of things around. So we're based in Christchurch, New Zealand, not Queenstown, which is behind me. We've operated for about 10 plus years, and our focus has been initially on Excel and Word training. So if anybody wants some Windows 95 and Excel 3.1 training, we're the people to come to. But the world's moved on, I guess, from that. So we focus on Office training, SharePoint training, so the whole Microsoft stack. We'll get into that. And also, we're a Work4Max partner, so we do a lot in the Work4Max space as well. And we build templates here and there in Microsoft Word. So that's what keeps us busy.
Awesome. Sounds like, yeah, a lot of services that I know from my experiences. I tend to jump into tools and try to work it out myself, but maybe and I'm not the best person to actually do that. So I'm just going to try to keep a bit of an eye on the chat as well. And obviously, everybody feel free to chuck your questions in there, or you can just unmute yourself if you wanting to ask any questions as we go through this. It's a casual forum of and we tend to just have a pretty relaxed environment, so jump in at any time, and yeah, I'll let David continue on with his slides.
Perfect. Right, up now. Sorry, just moving a couple of things around. Just share up a few things. I'm not going to scare the team with PowerPoint to Africa, but I wanted to set a couple of questions and also post some questions in the chat. So just get this popped out here. Cool. There's good questions in the chat. I'm a Teams user, not a Zoom user, so sing out if I need a little bit of guidance.
Yeah. I'll keep an eye on the chat, and I'll let you know if we've got any questions as we go.
So there were a few areas that we wanted to cover in this session, and really it was just about unpacking SharePoint, but there's more to SharePoint than just SharePoint, and I think that would be one of the key things to step away from the end of the session. The agenda I've got to talk to and answer questions on was, how does it fit in with Office 365, or you may have heard the term Microsoft 365. What about this Teams thing? How does that world work? OneDrive is another area that we get quite a few questions on. And then let's look at SharePoint itself for storing files or using it as intranet. So how can we do that? I've got a few areas that we're going to jump into questions and answers there, but there's always heaps of questions there. This business automation, so using forms and lists, how does that world work? And then how do we create a site itself? And I'll build one up as we go through. So does that sound like a topic? Is there anything else that's in the chat that somebody's really got a question they wanted to get across?
I don't have anything straight off the bat, so just continue on, and I've got a few things here that I'll bring to the discussion as well as whatever anybody else puts forward. Cool.
Okay. So a conversation about SharePoint needs to start with a conversation around Microsoft 365. And the reason for that is they're linked together. And I'm going to use the term Office 365 and Microsoft 365 interchangeably. They changed the name to Microsoft 365 about a month ago, so excuse me if I used both. But what that is a service you pay for, like any other SaaS-based software. You get a desktop version of Office, so Word, Excel, PowerPoint that we all know. You get a place to store information, and so that's the cloud or the Microsoft data center. So in Australia, that's in, I think it's Sydney and Adelaide, and then the other closest one would be up in Singapore. So it's where you store your data in the cloud. Within that, you've got this SharePoint and OneDrive. I'm talking specifically about documents here now. SharePoint, a place to put shared documents. OneDrive, a place to put your own documents. And people get confused and tied up, and Microsoft doesn't help themselves here either with the differences between the two. So I'll tackle that now, and we'll move on a bit further. So the way I like to explain it is you can save stuff in a file anywhere. You know, those file dividers, you can have that underneath your desk, and that's your OneDrive. It's files that you've got, and they're structured yourself in your filing cabinet under your desk. And you can choose to give a key to somebody else to access it, but you control it completely. SharePoint, it's the shared file cabinet in the office, and certain people have access to certain files there. So OneDrive, my stuff; SharePoint, work stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does to me. I can't see any other messages or questions about that. And I'm sure that we might delve into those differences a little bit before further on. I just also wanted to point out your slide deck is just showing as a normal mode, not presentation.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm just rejigging my slide
Happy with
deck.
that? Cool.
There we go. No, that was the
Why
one.
didn't they just call it ShareDrive instead of SharePoint?
Sorry, what was that?
You've got
OneDrive.
OneDrive.
Yeah, so it used to be called.
Got a little
Going
delay
back-
on your audio, David. So
Sorry.
we've got a small delay on your audio.
Okay. So I think the question was there, why not call it shared drive? It is sort of, and we'll get into that as we go forward. The previous name in it, and for our Australian visitors on this, OneDrive used to be called SkyDrive. But Sky TV, or Rupert Murdoch, actually owned that term, so hence that's why they renamed it about 5 or 6 years ago as OneDrive, if you want some trivia. So the other part of this is this area in here, and this is where all the fun starts happening. So this is in the online apps. So this is the equivalent for those that are familiar with Google Docs and Google Sheets, Microsoft Outlook Online, Word Online, Excel Online. It's the same structure. So that's where if you go to SharePoint, you go to a browser, you interact with a document in Word Online or Excel Online. And then there's some products in here which you can't install like you can with, say, Excel. So that's things like Sway and Yammer and Power Apps, or even Power BI if you've seen that. So there's some tools here which are web only. And so that's where SharePoint is this glue that brings it together. And finally, in this Microsoft world, you've got the apps, the mobile apps, so that you work on your phone. And there's a SharePoint app as well. So you notice in this, there's no actual app for SharePoint. There's SharePoint, think of it like a canvas where you can put things on. So within
David, I've got a question there from Emma. Emma, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question? Because I think that's relevant now.
Unmute. Sorry, I'll unmute. Yeah, so I suppose just understanding, because my knowledge is very basic and not very much with SharePoint. So my question is, what is it equivalent to with other systems in the market to try to understand how it works? Yeah. So
in a non-cloud world, it's equivalent to a file server, whereas OneDrive is equivalent to your My Documents.
What's equivalent to, sorry?
A file server, so a server.
Right, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
So that's where it's come from. In a cloud world, SharePoint for storing documents, we're just talking about documents here, is equivalent to, say, a Team Drive in Dropbox or the equivalent in Google Drive. And the reason why it's different is it's controlled by an administrator. They choose, so it's shared ownership decided based on whoever's the administrator. Whereas OneDrive, it's your own personal work-based content. And I think Emma asked the question, why do we recommend SharePoint instead of OneDrive for shared? The reason for that is if you store everything in your work OneDrive and you leave, you've got to kind of unstitch all that because the files live in your world, not the team's world. So you end up having to choose where to put it. Whereas if you've got it in a shared location, SharePoint, just because somebody's left, the files are still there in the work filing cabinet. Does that make sense?
Got a thumbs up there, so that looks like
and there's more to the story as we go along, so we will get there, but it's worth spending the time in that space, because we see many clients or places that will build everything in their OneDrive, behave like they do, say, with Google Drive. They'll share to other people, and then Johnny leaves or Mary leaves, and where are the files? Oh, they were in their OneDrive, and I didn't know I was working out of their personal location as opposed to in a shared site, and all sort of spirals downhill from there.
I just have a question around that side of things, and I know you've got a lot more to cover. I'm just wondering about the security side of things. You might want to touch on that a little bit further on, but you've touched on people coming and going, and those documents being secure, what that looks like from a bit of security side of things, and whether you need a secure platform over top of it, or if it's secure enough in itself.
So you've just like Xero, actually. You've got to log in to get into your Xero account or your partner hub, and that gives you access to other clients' information. In the Microsoft 365 way, you've got one login that gets you in, and that accesses your email, SharePoint, and all the rest of it. So you've got one key to get in. Now, keeping that key and login secure, super important. Obviously, putting on two-factor authentication and things like that is important, but you've basically got one key to get into. How secure you make it, it depends on how secure you want your password, whether you put two-factor on, and what else you spend on security. But that's the key, is that one login rather than multiple logins around that. You could spend hours talking about what happens behind it, and that's all very exciting, but it's basically you've got one key to get into anything related to Microsoft 365. The other side of security is what happens when you delete stuff. And KPMG were in the news yesterday because they deleted 145,000 users. An IT person pressed the wrong button, literally, and deleted 145,000 users' Teams conversations, which was probably a bad day, I imagine. What you can do also is a thing called retention. So retention, I've got an analogy for this, which I might bring up while we're talking about it now. Yeah, I'll just bring this slide up. So
it seems to me that it's a pretty hot topic in our industry, and many users are asking those questions around security. So it's, I guess that we can delve a little bit into, those variances between what... we've got somebody chatting there. Some variances between what SharePoint, OneDrive, say, versus other tools like Dropbox or Box and those kind of tools.
So I think there's two sides to those ones. There's, first of all, it's how strong is your password. So if you've got a rubbish password and you leave the door open, then you're going to get hit by a hacker. So that's one side of it. Then the other side of security is what stops us doing things that we shouldn't do with the data. So there's the fort on the way in, and then there's the fort on the way out. And in files that's stored in SharePoint, we use this. Drives me nuts a bit, but basically whenever I share a file or send a file, we've got a thing across the top of it that says, hey, if it's got Australian financial data like a SWIFT number in there, alert the user. And you can choose what you want to do. You can say just alert them. You can say block it and don't allow to send it. You can pass it through different ways. So that's securing the data once it's in the cloud, so that somebody inadvertently doesn't email it out or share it out over. And that's more of your risk, as long as you've got a decent password and two-factor on, you're 90% there on stopping somebody hacking in. And you could spend hours talking about extra security stuff, and it's all very exciting, but 90% of the work gets done with a good password and two-factor and being a bit aware. But what happens when the data's in there, that ability to be able to put filters on it to say, hey, if it's got a Swift number, or if it's tagged with this, or if it's got a health something or other, don't let somebody share it out. Because you think of most data breaches are going out, not coming in.
Yeah, we've got something similar on our SharePoint, and I get notified each time, say, a bank statement gets saved into our system. So from what I gather is that SharePoint has so that sort of an extra level policy to be able to build it within it that maybe some of the other sort of mainstream document storage systems don't have. It's automatically built in.
So it's got that, and then the other part of it is what happens if I accidentally, the person at KPMG that accidentally deleted 145,000 users or some files. What happens if I do something wrong, either maliciously or non-deliberately? And so that's where there's two things, and the conversations there lead to backup and retention, and they're two very different things. So who, out of interest in the chat, who backs up their Xero?
Put your hand up if you want. That might be the easiest way to get feedback there. But I actually do back up my Xero. Yep. So I've only got a hand, maybe two,
and it's
two
an
or three
interesting
people.
discussion. Xero is the same as any cloud service. You can back it up. So what do you do, Carla? You back it up and put it somewhere else?
Yeah, we use a third-party backup server. Yes. Yeah.
So there's lots of tools like that. Take a third, and really that's is a backstop. If Xero decided they wanted to get out of business tomorrow, you've got that data there, and you can go from there.
We actually use it for protection against the client that doesn't know what they're doing. So if they get into their Xero file and go and delete, the last few pay runs or whatever that might look like, so that because you can do so much by locking the file, but they still can actually change things. So that's
a backup. We take it somewhere else and put it somewhere else. What Office 365 does is it's like Xero. It's got a thing called retention, and what that means is that if I delete a file, it goes into another rubbish bin, and you can get it back out of there, or you can lock it and say it looks permanently. I don't have the slide, but I'll give you the analogy, because it is Thursday here in New Zealand, which is rubbish day, and I'm sure everybody's got the same thing. So what happens when you delete a file is file gets deleted, it goes into a recycle bin in the cloud, and it sits there for 30 days. So at home, who's got a rubbish bin under the sink? Yeah, most people do. So that's your first stage recycle bin. You put it in there, and it sits there until it's full, and then Dave takes it out and puts it in the bin out the side of the house. That's your second stage recycle bin. That stays there for a week. Okay, so first stage stays there for a day or half a day or however quick you're filling that up. Second one, it stays there for a week. From both of those cases, you can then restore. You just need to go and jump in and find it. The third stage is when the Garbo, is that right? What's the Australian term?
Yep, Garbo.
Yeah. It normally has an O at the end of it. Probably called Steve-O, comes along and you take your wheelie bin, you stick it out on the street. And at that stage, it's gone. If Steve-O's put it in the back of the Garbo truck and gone forever, you're never going to get it back. So what cloud software has is a thing called retention, which means that it goes through that first bin under the sink, second bin behind the house, and then it just sits at the end of your driveway forever. You can say, never have Steve the Garbo take it away. And that's called retention. Now, the challenge with the retention is you've got to go find stuff, which, you dumpster dive in, and that's hard. But you know with confidence that you can get that file back if you need to. Okay? So you need to have, and that's where KPM got burnt, as they turned off the retention, and that's how everything got deleted. Because sometimes not everything gets backed up, and sometimes with your backup tools. So it's been really aware of what gets backed up, because it's got an API into your backup tool, and what you need to put on retention. We would recommend going belts and braces, turn the retention on, and also turn on a backup if you wanted to pay for a backup tool. You can get smarter than that, and a lot of financial organizations do. They'll classify stuff and say, okay, this is a financial record, I'm going to classify it as this, and I need to keep it for 7 years and then I can dispose of it. This is a XYZ record, we're going to keep it for 3 years and then we'll dispose. So you can start to get into that world as you want to. But think of the 3 steps. So security, great question. The front door, 2-factor, and lots of other smarts if you want to. But then think more importantly, how do you stop information leaking out that shouldn't leak out? And there's lots of other stuff you can do there, but that's probably the things. Just think Steve the Garbo man. Thanks, Heather. Is a way to work its way through.
Very good.
The next part to think in relation to SharePoint is this thing called an Office 365 group. And so there's a slide up there with lots of bits. And the name of this topic was Unpacking SharePoint, which kind of makes sense. It's what do you actually get in that collection? What do you get in SharePoint? SharePoint at its heart allows you to put all these things. So, shared email, a calendar, some shared documents, a list, and some of these new features like Microsoft Teams, Planner, OneNote. You've got all those features that come together. When you create a SharePoint site, you get access to all of this, and the glue that brings it together is this group of people. So an Office 365 group is a collection of people that have access to all these features. And you can take these features and put it on SharePoint. If you wanted to be really pure about it, the only bit that really is SharePoint is this shared document and shared list. The rest of it are other apps that you have permission to as part of it.
David, I just have a question there from Amar. Do you mind if people take screen prints of
Yeah,
screenshots
no worries.
of your,
Yeah, and I'm happy to share the deck afterwards as well. That's fine.
That was going to be my suggestion. Awesome, thank you.
Cool. So when you create a SharePoint site, you get access to all these features because you've taken a group of people and you've put it into a SharePoint location. Now that leads to so what is this SharePoint thing? So there's a couple of terms I'm going to use here. So a SharePoint site, think of it as your office, okay? And people have got keys to the office, yeah? So some people can come in. Sorry, I just chat.
Thanks for that comment, Kath. That made me laugh.
It's just about fish and chip time here in New Zealand too, by the way. So you get a SharePoint site. Think of it as your office. You get a key to the office and everybody can come into it. Inside that, you've got pages. They're your workspaces, different office locations, and you've got lists which you can put in documents. So how does that look? It looks a little bit like this. Here's a workspace. It's almost it's not too similar to this one. And in it, not that one. Whose is that one?
That's on the other side of the camera here, David. Yeah. Not behind me. That's over there.
So, or that one. But we're looking at this one. This is your workspace. But in a digital land, you've got a document library. You've got lists of things. And you might have parts. So you put all these, they're called web parts, onto a page, and you end up with that workspace in a digital format rather than a physical format.
Oh, I think we've got David's frozen. No, I think it's me.
I
think I was frozen then. I wasn't sure if it was you or me. Sorry, to continue on.
So you end up with these bits in a digital format in a workspace, but it's not unsimilar to an environment elsewhere. So how that could look, is, I'll just jump out of this. And you can see the screen now. It says Workflow Max.
Yep.
Yeah, cool, perfect. So this is a SharePoint site, and in it we have got documents over here. We've got some apps and lists of things. We've got some news, and we've got some links. So it's a digital location. If I come into where it says documents here, we've got various documents, manuals and guides. I can come in here and there's some documents in this space. If I come back to home, I could add a news item if I wanted to, or I could jump into some news items that we've created here. So this is a site that we use internally to talk about bits and pieces that are happening in the Workflow Max world. Might want to come in here, and here's a news article that we placed, which has got a link out to a video on OneDrive on documents and Workflow Max. So they're news items. Think of it like posties that you would stick on the side of your office door. We've got some quick links here. So these link out to various areas that we might reference all the time. We can hover over here. I think, Cassandra, you've done some work with Lucy. You can see we've got some of the team in here. Documents down the side, that's the documents, and it's that web part that I was showing beforehand. Now, the other thing that you can do is have what's called a list. And this is a list of lists, say it again. It's a group of lists, a list here. So if I go new item, and the scenario we're using for this list here is it's a list of Workflow Max apps. So I don't know, let's pick one, a receipt bank. And with WFM to point. Where are they based? I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm actually a Zero Bronze partner, and I was trying to get my access.
We've got somebody. Yep, thanks for that, Heather. Taking
control. And we can add some information around it. This is a list, is like you have a Excel spreadsheet with columns of data. So we've all got those, yeah? And I'm going to save it. So lists are things that don't have document. They're not documents, they're just lists of items. And we scroll back down here and we'll see that has appeared there as this receipt bank list. So if I come back out to this slide deck here, you can see we're just using our office scenario here as our physical workplace. Now we've got a digital one and we're putting those items on the page. Remember I talked about the page? Well, that's your workspace that you work from. Now, does that see how we can very quickly construct a intranet page with bits in there?
So I know Cass has listed in the questions, does a list mean knowledge base? And my question was going to be something similar. So what's the purpose of a list? Is it just purely just a visual, or does it have some functionality behind it?
A list can be used for anything. So if you think of what you use Excel to put lists of information, it might be people coming to a party, it might be lists of clients, it might be the sports team, it could be whatever in a list in Excel. When you're not actually adding stuff up, you're just creating a list. So
like a semi-database potentially, or something?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It is a database and it's got some ability to do some more automation from there.
Okay.
Now, what's coming in that world is you can create templates. So we might have a list which is a list for leave. You fill it in and then it sends a workflow through from there. So if I come into this WFM apps list, notice on the left-hand side, now I'm looking at the actual list as opposed to the list on the wall, but I've got this automate button here. So I could say, okay, this receipt bank item, automate, and I'm going to request sign off on this. Or I could even come in and create a different flow, a workflow, which might be when I add this, request approval from the manager for my leave. So if it was a leave form or anything like that, they're using this tool called Power Automate to do that. I could then send a signature for the selected item and route it through an email signature tool. So that's where lists get really exciting very, very quickly.
Just on this, David, are we still working only with users that are part of the organisation at this point? Something that I had a question on, and I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, but it's around when is a SharePoint site an internal sort of tool to use, and when is it an external tool? Because I know, just as you're talking about this automation side of things and they sign off, my brain is starting to go with, oh, could you be using it for clients and getting clients to sign off? But yeah, could I just get you to elaborate on that side?
Yeah, sure. So overall, it would be fair. I don't think we've got any Microsofties on the call. It'd be fair to say that Microsoft product works really well within a large organization. You think of where they built it from. So works perfectly for leave sign-offs with people within an organization. But it will never work. So it's been built in with that in mind. Now, you could certainly invite somebody externally into a SharePoint site, but there will be the odd limitation on what they can and cannot do. So, for example, on this list here, I could actually add a column, I'll do that now, of people. And I'm going to put team owner. And so now I can come in here and go, okay, Zendesk as an item. I'm going to add an owner, and it's going to look for people within your organization, okay? So that works really well when you're working within your organization there. I couldn't add somebody externally in this list. They're not going to be here. But somebody externally could come in and add something in here. I could add it so they fill in something and it sends an email to somebody else, but it'll work reasonably well. But ideally, it works better when they're licensed.
Okay, so SharePoint's not going to replace something that manages your workflow with your clients, for instance, but it would potentially serve the purpose of managing internal workflows and processes, yeah?
It will do some of that, but it just needs a bit of planning if you're going to be working with an external people.
Can I just ask, just on that point with external clients and sign-offs, just on Carla's point there, it still confuses me. We have another one called Suite Files.
Yeah.
Can you integrate that into this for client sign-offs because they've got that e-sign?
Yeah, sure. So Suite Files is a great product. We've been having a look at that. Think of Suite Files as a skin on top of SharePoint. So all the files live in SharePoint behind. Suite Files have just done a nice skin and provided some feature sets like their signature tool. But you could equally, I could put a document, if I come to this document here, I could put a document in here, click on it, automate it. Now the request sign off, which is going to pop in a second, will ideally be internally, but if I go create a flow, I could create a flow that sends, gets signatures for it. And that uses an interface like, I think this one uses DocuSign. So you could build, Suite File's done a great job of putting a skin over the top, but you could build it natively in Office 365 if you wanted to, using Flow here. So what this does is get signatures. I'd have to have an Adobe Sign license, and I would then it would connect through. I don't have an Adobe Sign license.
So you're basically adding on the tool that allows you to perform that function, the sign off, to your flow, and then that allows you to create a flow from SharePoint to that add-on or that connected tool.
Yeah.
And then the client can just sign it and email it back to you.
Yep. So in this scenario, it gets signed and then it's deposited back into the SharePoint location.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So if you think about this from an internal, external view, you could, I don't know, you've got a chart of accounts, you put it into a location, you want it peer reviewed by somebody internally, you could do that. Then it's out to, so you do that as a flow, sign off internal. Then the next step in that would be signed off by the client. So you'd use, Adobe Sign or something like that. Document comes back into SharePoint, so it's moved through another state, and then you could do something else from there. Then it gets a final email back. So you can workflow that. So this is using what's called Power Automate, or what is used to be called Microsoft Flow.
And it's so I've got a question here about Flow. It works like Zapier,
Yeah.
in that it connects the SharePoint to other tools that may be external. Is that right?
So if I come over here into the templates in Power Automate, I keep calling it Flow. I think Flow is a better name than Power Automate, but anyway, I can search for templates here. So there's a pile in there. I could grab when a certain tweets on a certain hashtag, it just puts them in a SharePoint list. Some of the ones that we might use a little bit are, I'm not sure if anybody's seen Microsoft Forms.
Yep.
So somebody fills in a form and then it takes it and puts it in a spreadsheet or does something else with it. So it's the Microsoft Zapier. There's nothing there for Xero at this stage. You can build your own hooks into it if you wanted to.
Okay, so in essence, you could build out different processes using different apps and stages of it. Let's say I'm going to use what's on top of everybody's mind at the moment because we love talking about JobKeeper, but you could basically work through a process where these sort of things need to happen in order to get to that end process, which is, and can you build out checklists? This is something I'm not sure of. Can you build into that flow sort of a checklist or staged, and how do you track, and how would you track that?
So let's build a Twitter one. We'll do this live, eh? Do you want to give this a go?
Yeah.
Heather, I'm going to get you
well.
tweets in a second. You good with that? So we're going to come back in. So come back to this WorkFomex site. And I'm going to create a new list. And we'll call this Xero tweets. Okay, so I've got the repository where I'm going to put this information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to suck the Xero tweets in, and then I'm going to ask for approval on somebody. But this could equally be other documents. So in here, oops, not Power Apps, Power Automate, create a flow. Yeah, you're right. And your head goes into overdrive of what you can do in this. I think the strength of Power Automate is it keeps it all within the Microsoft world. Now, a couple of things you need to be aware of before you start spinning your head on this one is there's a licensing cost involved if you start to connect to things outside the Microsoft world. So if you connect to, I don't know, Xero, you're going to need to start to license it. Whereas if you're just doing generic stuff within the Microsoft land, there's less of a licensing cost.
And with that licensing, is that licensing for the Microsoft Flow or Power Automate app itself? Yep.
Yeah.
As well as those other third-party tools that you might be.
Yeah.
Yep.
You need to license both. So we're going
to.
Yeah, and the rules change a bit there. So do your due diligence before you dream up something awesome. Just do your diligence on, is this what you want?
So one of my questions I have is about, I guess, at what point is, and I might be jumping forward a little bit, but at what point, because obviously our minds are all going a little bit, wow, we could be doing all these things, but how easy is it for a user to get in there and just start creating and building this out? And do they need a specialist? And if so, what point would you be recommending to do that? So I know from the way that I work is I need to be able to play and see and feel before I kind of get an understanding of what I could be doing or what could work. Yeah. And for me, some of the processes have been really simple, but some of it has been just like, it's a pretty beast of a machine. And at some point there, I think that for me, I'm looking at engaging an expert. What would your recommendation be around where that sort of line stands, and does it vary just depending on the person?
It does vary a bit in person. I'd say Power Apps has got is if you stay within, sorry, I haven't got my password, but it's in a different account, so I'm not sure if I can do the connection. We might come back to that. But if you stay within these templates, it's really easy to a point. If I come into, say, this one, and this one will connect.
And so just around that, there's the SharePoint itself is included as a function of Microsoft Office.
Correct. Yep.
With the subscription. Yeah, that's right. Yep. So that hopefully answers your question.
So that's fine. There's add-ons that you start paying for, but this is the flow. And if I come into edit here, you'll see it kind of looks similar to a Zapier flow, but you can get more complex quite quickly as you add more steps and work your way through. So
standard flow is included in subscriptions.
Standard
correct?
Flow of any activity that you've got within Office 365 is already included.
Yep.
Once you start to connect with these premium connectors,
okay,
that's when you start paying money. And that can get complex quickly. I would, realistically, I'd probably, unless it's your core business, you may be quicker to pass that off to somebody else to build something for you. But I would encourage you to work with the tool first so you can get a better scope of what you want to build.
We have a question with what happens with Office 365 in a leap year. That was a good question there.
Oh, that was last year. Yeah, you get 50% off. I don't know. Any of the in all of the
any of the premium connections available?
They're available across any plan, but they're not included.
Yeah. So they're just available.
Yeah. And we could spend hours going into the licensing of this, which I don't really want to do. So say E3, yeah, Cassandra, you've got access to Power Automate at a base level. So you can automate lists and documents within your Office 365. But if you want to connect to Adobe Sign, you're going to need to start licensing.
I would be interested to know from those that I can see on the video call, how many of you are currently Microsoft Office users or have a Office 365 subscription?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, so maybe half that I can sort of see there. And out of that, are any of you actually using SharePoint, or are you using the sort of standard OneDrive? So I guess showing of hands of who's using OneDrive out of their Office 365. Yeah, okay, most of them are using OneDrive. So I think it's a really clear point there that those that have the Office 365 subscriptions, the OneDrive side of it's what people know and understand, and it's probably because it's really simple and easy to set up and get access to. It just kind of happens when you get your Office 365, doesn't it? And so for those users that have OneDrive already set up and that might look at wanting to migrate to the SharePoint platform, is there a simple sort of process or tool to migrate from one to the other?
Yeah, there's some free tools there. So I just want to tackle a couple of things actually first. I'm just going to come back to this slide. So that's how you can build a SharePoint site, and you can add more bits and pieces in there. But I just want to come back to this slide, if that's okay, and we'll get to
absolutely.
So we've covered this, and I'm going to beat this home a few times. OneDrive, your stuff, SharePoint, managed by your organization. That does mean that files may start in OneDrive and you work on them, and then at some stage you move them to SharePoint, just as you might start with a file, put it on your desktop, and then move it somewhere else down as it evolves. So that happens quite a lot. But this next slide I want to build out. So there's OneDrive and SharePoint, and I'll just pull it all the way through, because I said there's one other bit that Microsoft doesn't really help itself in, is this thing called the OneDrive app. Okay, so if I save a file, I save it up into the cloud. Okay, and I can go to my browser and look at it and all the rest of it. And when I share it, I can open it in Word Online, or if it's Excel, Excel Online, and I can choose to open in my desktop. But there's this other product called the OneDrive app, and I'll show it in a second on my one, which allows to see your files in Windows Explorer, which is the familiar way. So this side here is very much how we think of Dropbox. And it's all using the OneDrive app, but OneDrive has two meanings. OneDrive, place in the cloud where I personally store my stuff, and OneDrive, the app that I use to synchronize stuff from the cloud to my computer. Are you with me there?
I am, yep.
And it was why I wanted to call this out was just on the question. So I'll just bring up my, where's it going? Explorer, there we go. So if we come into my screen here, we've got OneDrive and we've got Ripped Orange New Zealand. So these are SharePoint locations, okay? But it's all using that OneDrive app. If I sort for OneDrive, let's see if I can bring it up. It's all using that OneDrive app that you see on your desktop. So if I come into, say, this here, I can see some files on here that I'm working on, and I'm viewing them and using OneDrive to synchronize them up and down. So, and why I wanted to bring it up there was a lot of people think they're using OneDrive, but they may be using OneDrive to synchronize. You can also use OneDrive to synchronize SharePoint files up and down, just like you do within Dropbox.
Yeah, mine looks very similar to yours.
Yeah.
I have the OneDrive for personal stuff, and then the SharePoint site. And something that we do is obviously your PC storage space may not want to have all of those documents there, so they sit. From my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they sit in the cloud, but they only sync down to your PC when you open them, which is what you can see there.
Correct. Yeah. So if I come in here to say course manuals, see the little the blue clouds. What that means is that's a picture of the file. If I come in here, I think we've got a big video somewhere or other. That's a reasonably big file, this one, the certification course. It's 3 megs, but it's not on my computer. If I double click, it downloads. So this is how it dynamically manages how much storage is there. Dropbox and Google Drive have the same feature. So that storage is where people come undone. So who's it, Melinda? Find laptops that don't allow for cloud files. So it means you can have a smaller hard drive and store stuff in the cloud and only suck it down as you need it, and it can manage it dynamically.
Yeah, so one of the issues, and it might be the way that I've used it, but so one of the issues I've had with OneDrive, but have not had the same problem in SharePoint, and I don't know if it's due to the differences between the two, but with OneDrive, say I had a whole bunch of photos that I'd moved from Dropbox. Actually, I was moving everything out of my Dropbox and streamlining things, and I put some photos in my OneDrive, and then that something synced on my computer, which meant that the files were no longer on my computer, but they hadn't gone up to my OneDrive. They actually hadn't. So I'd moved them on my PC, but they hadn't synced to my my cloud storage. So I actually lost them. And can the same thing happen with SharePoint? And what would be the sort of measures to prevent that stuff happening?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, absolutely. You can lose files if you move them one location and it doesn't sync up. Think of it like leaving some files in a cafe. You don't take it with you. Same scenario. If you don't catch and the sync drive is the sync, which takes time, doesn't kick in straight away, then you can run into issues. Our recommendation is that when you're moving large files and things, is actually do it straight in the cloud. Go up into the browser and move them from there rather than from the desktop. But yeah, you've got, and if you see that you've got a little X, on your Dropbox, your Google Drive, or your OneDrive sync tool, go and have a look at it and see what it's saying, because there'll be a reason why. One thing it does have in OneDrive is it's got a feature that allows it, that will automatically back up all the My Documents and photos on your PC. So if I come into this PC and look, say, in pictures here, you can see I've got some pictures, and those pictures, not in this case, but it could say always back those up to the cloud if you wanted to, or if you're a person that actually likes using the documents document library. So if you use this, which you can see I don't, and if that's where you put your structure, then that's fine. You just turn something on and it just hoovers all those files up into the cloud.
Is that for, sorry, I missed, was that for OneDrive or SharePoint?
So because it's your My Documents on computer, it would go into OneDrive location.
Okay. We've got a question from our Facebook page here. Let me just see if I can move this around. That they were considering using SharePoint, but had heard that from one of the user groups that there's still issues with over 10,000 files. Are you
That's
able
a
to
good
comment
question.
on that?
Yeah, yep. So yes, so if I come back into, I presume the user group can see where I'm going, I presume. So the question is how many files, the 10,000 file limit, and where that bites people is when you search, it only searches the first, I think it's 5,000. So if there's something at 10,015, you'll never find it. Now that's a limit based on a document library. So if we remember what I was talking about with the document library, it's that filing cabinet where we put stuff. There's a very simple way around that, which is you just come in and create another document library. So just like you could only physically get a certain amount of files in, a 3-level filing cabinet. What do? You buy another 3-level filing cabinet and put it beside it. That's the same. The drawers in a filing cabinet are not endless.
And there's no additional cost for storage space when
so you get storage is cheap as chips, but you get an allowance per user. Okay. And then you can buy more if you need to. We don't see too many clients having to buy extra storage. And bear in mind, in OneDrive, it's pretty much unlimited. I think it's a terabyte or more of storage with your Office 365 license. So if you're looking for somewhere just to put files, a OneDrive for Business, so an Office 365 business plan, which in New Zealand is about $6 a month. It's a good place to store, and you get everything, which I'm showing you now, is a good place to store unlimited, pretty much unlimited storage in your OneDrive.
We've just got another question from the Facebook page that's related to security. It's from Simon. Hi, Simon. In Ireland, what level of user security audit is there? So, who did what and when?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it's a good one to come into. So, if I come into this document, I'm going to load up a document, make some changes, then we'll jump in and we'll be able to see what happens on here. So, if I come into SharePoint here, and I don't think it's anything here, I'm going to upload a file. And luckily, I think I've already got one here on my desktop. So I'm going to load up this document. It's cool. And it's interesting, actually.
Always interesting on live demos.
Well, I never demonstrate out of our own environment. So this is our coach one, and I just spotted that it didn't have the permission to do what I wanted it to do. So I'm going to upload one here into this one. Just look around that. I'll get back to what I was showing in a second. So here's a file here, and I'm going to come into the file, and we'll add something for our Irish friend. It was Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah. This is for you, Simon. Top of the morning to you.
For those that hadn't noticed, in Office, there's also an ability to insert pictures, and actually it'll do a Bing search. You can do this in the desktop version as well. So there we go. I haven't been to Ireland, so We'll go with that. Okay, so I can add some information and I can close out of that file. So I will close it and come back to the location where it is. And if I come in now, I can see it's called the version history. It's going to pop up and it'll show two. One when I first put it up and then the second one here. So it's not track changes, but it's going to keep creating versions forever in that space. And that can be, so that gives you a feel of who's changed the document and what's happened. If you've got track changes on, and I can even come into, say, this document, open it. And second, let's see. I can even do a compare between the two to find the changes in the document. There we go. So I do a compare now, and it's going to open up the other one, and we'll see one with this is a blank doc, and we'll see the other one with top of the morning to you. There you go. So you can see the original there. So you've got that ability to track and audit what's happened in it. Now,
I think that's really interesting because it's just like, from what I'm getting out of it is, you know, we talk about security in so many different ways, but just being able to delve into what's happened with a document. I know for me, even sometimes I might make a change to a document and then, you know, go, oh, I didn't want to do that actually, or I want to revert back because I need to, you know, look back at where things were changed. So even for my own purposes, not necessarily always, you know, looking at what a team member's done wrong. It's sometimes good just to check your own changes on things.
So that allows you to see who's changed it, but you can also do things. If I hover over this file, whoops, I need to press then. If I hover over this file, this card comes up. You can see there it's saying 3 views, and if I come over a bit more, I can see some more details on the file. It's going to give me the details there. Now, there's not a lot of details on those files, but if I come into, say, something, where do we spend a bit of time? If I hover on this this file, we'll see 56 views popped up. So you can actually see it's got that information of who's there. And I think this question was, how much can you see? You can actually come into the back end and see who's looked at it. I could even do that now if I wanted to get a bit more detail. So the 56 views, I can see who looked at it, what week, and I can go back further in that space. I could potentially see the viewers as well if I've turned that on.
Okay, that's interesting.
So you can see actually. So what's driving that is this thing on what's actually surfacing in your organization. So if I come into SharePoint here, it's driving, if I come down further, I can start to see what documents are being viewed. You can see in here, it's giving me some information about Lucy did this, and see it moved. So it's showing you what is important. It actually surfaces up documents that people are working on a regular basis. So this is good. Do you want to hear a horror story on this?
Please do. We do like horror stories. So
as I said, what it does is it picks documents that are popular. So if I look here, Lucy modified this lesson plan on a course we built on our intranets 9 hours ago. The lunch survey is popular. What else? I viewed this Office 365 overview a little while ago, and William Shakespeare modified this document. So this is all our training environment. That's why we don't train in a live environment. Organization was doing a restructure. Consultants came in and were working on some documents. They put it in the documents in a SharePoint site. That's fine. Thought it was buried away. Yeah, I can hear buried away in a folder somewhere where nobody would see. That's fine. But it was a popular document. They're coming in and out. So what does a popular tweet do? It trends. And so people come in here and they go, oh, this is getting popular. Oh, I do have access to it. So you do need to consider when you create a SharePoint site, remember the house, and you invite people in, they can get to anything there. Just because you've hidden it in the drawer in the corner under the socks does not mean that they can't do it. And the beauty of being able to show what's popular is good, but sometimes it can cause all hell to break loose, which did in that organisation.
So on that, David, something that I've done is I've got one SharePoint site, but I have multiple document libraries.
Yep.
So, and in those document libraries, I've put some security or permissions around them. So is that an alternative way? Because one of my questions was going to be, I see you've got lots of different sites there. When would you be using a separate site versus using the permissions ability in a within the modules of one site, if I've got the terminology right?
Talking about here, if we come back to that house analogy, we've got a house and we can have no locks on the doors internally. And that's normally how most people do it, yeah? And so if you want to have a house about something else, you just build one beside it. And SharePoint is this really flat environment. So you just build a house and then you build another house. Now and then you can do exactly what you're saying, which is you can create a new document library. So this file is one that I created. At the moment, it's visible to everybody in the house. But if I come up into here and into library settings, I can change the permissions, wherever it's gone, permissions for this document library, and say these files are not, because these are the people that can get into the house, it's a different group of people. So you put a lock on the door within the house. Now the challenge with that is it gets a bit messy on who's got a key to the door in the house and not. And sometimes it's easier to create a completely new SharePoint site or a new house.
Okay.
So you end up doing a bit of both.
So like we have a hub for Inverness, but within that I have document libraries depending on the department of the business. So it might be HR, locked down, no one's got a key to that. But then our client files, we've got access to that to the team members that need it.
Yeah, correct. The other thing you can do, and the trend in all of this is to have lots of sites, and we'll get to Microsoft Teams as we go through this, but the trend is to have lots of sites. Well, I've got this slide up. The other thing you can do is say, okay, that's fine. Everybody can get into any room in the house, but you can only do certain things in those rooms. So this files one, anybody within the organization can get in, but the visitors, perhaps they can, so owners are, members are everybody who can get into the house. You might say, actually, they can only view stuff when it's been that document library. They can get to it, but they can't view it. So you can put other granular permissions in there as well. What I've done here in this documents one, and that's why I had to switch to another one, is notice that there's this approval status. So I've said when you load up a file, so when I come to this client A project, you notice to see this file Cloud Coach pending that was uploaded by this account. It doesn't have approval to actually publish it to everybody else. So if I wanted to publish it, I would actually need to log into, let's do this on my other browser. I would need to log into a different account and actually approve it, and then everybody could see it. So you're saying, okay, you can put stuff there, but not everybody in the organization can see it until it's been approved. So you can use that type of setup as well.
Could you see a list of documents that are pending approval to be uploaded? And going back to the flow side of things, could you also see from that point of view, like a dashboard, I guess, of things that need to be actioned or done or next step?
Yeah, so in your My Flows, you can absolutely do that.
And I've got a question here for Emma. I'm not sure if she's still on. Emma, did you want to ask your question if you're still around? No, it doesn't look like she is. It was in relation to Google search functionality. Can you do search?
She is there.
Oh, is she? Sorry, Emma, do you want to? I can't see you on my screen.
Too many people here today.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's fantastic. Yeah, I just had a question about search functionality within where documents are stored. Is there a Google search function instead of looking in folders and
Yes, it's a perennial debate on do I do I search or do I structure in structured folders? Most people still do folders, but you can choose to. So I could choose in this folder to have different columns. I add one in here now. Choice. Color choices, that's interesting. And I could choose now to actually, this file, where was it? Image, we'll make it choice 1. And so it's blue. So I can choose that and actually view this information by metadata, something around it. So that's one way to structure, and you can create views, and there's a different way to structure it if you don't like to have folders. Be realistic though, people get really excited about this, but a lot of people still like that structured navigation for folders. But I can also come back in here, see where it says search this library. If I search for the word top of the morning to you, what was his name in Ireland?
Simon. Getting a lot of shout outs, Simon.
Hopefully. Oh, no, it was in this file. That's right, it was in this document library. If I search here, it'll find it because it's got the word top in it. So it will search within the document itself. So you can actually do that, and it'll search into the files.
When you upload a PDF document to SharePoint, does it automatically OCR it? For those that don't know what OCR, it's optical character recognition. So pull out sort of that, like you said, metadata. Does it do that?
It can do that. I'm not sure if it does it automatically, to be honest. But it can do that. I think it does. Yeah.
I think you'd have to make the PDF OCR applicable, because my scanner allows you to do it. So I think it'd have to be in the PDF setup.
Yeah, well, yes and no. So because what it will do, it will actually look at images within a document as well. So Microsoft OneNote, if you put, say, a car registration in there, it'll pick it up.
Okay.
So if I put insert pictures.
Ella, can you give me a drink?
Emma, we've still got you on.
Ready on that.
All good.
Number plate. We'll go with no, we'll go with that one. PFQ. Let's remember that. So if I save that, I think you've got to, yeah, picture format, yeah, and I'm going to save it as a PDF, and I'm going to put it on my desktop here, PF. Back to that in a second. UXP, wasn't it? So if I load that file up into that same SharePoint location, let's come back in here. One.
See if it works.
We'll give it a little while. We might come back. I know that if I put that into OneNote, it would.
Okay. We have a question from Cass. Cass, do you want to ask your question? Can't hear you, Cass. You're still on mute.
Oh, actually, I might answer Cassandra's question that I said.
That was Cass. She was about to. There you go. You're good now. Yeah.
So, David, we've been running a Dropbox structure, particularly because it's linked back to the document management in Workflow Max or Practice Manager.
Yeah.
But keen to consider and look at SharePoint as a solution. Is there any way to overlay your existing Dropbox structure into a SharePoint structure?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things which I'm going to talk to here. We can see the screen now. If I come into support, where is it? Setup.
Because we don't want to lose the document management side of things that we're leveraging off of from Practice Manager, which happens through the Dropbox integration.
You'd need to switch to Suite files to do that.
Okay.
Yep, so the answer is no on that one.
All right, thank you.
You could create a flow that takes every new documents in Dropbox and puts it in SharePoint, and then, but it's going to be one way, and I'm not sure the value you'd get out of that.
Yeah, okay.
But what I was going to say is there's a product called Microsoft acquired it called Mover, and that's free. And there we go. What that will do is you can point Mover at any of these tools, and it will pick up those files and put them into your SharePoint. So it's a free cloud mover tool. We've found it really good, and in fact, we had a client that they were in the G Suite world, so they had Google Sheets and Google Docs, and it picked them up and automatically turned them into Microsoft Word and Excel files on the way through. Don't know how it did it, but it was pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's Mover.
Thanks for sharing that, David. I'm going to see if I can put a link in the chat for those that are on for that.
Cool.
And that would be just a self-service sort of go through that. Yep.
You might have to Google it from here, Mover, and then you'll find it within your Office 365 tenant. But it's a great tool to move across.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to call out while I was here in the admin center is, and this is about, you may be interested to see who on the chat has got the rights to administer their own Office 365.
I think that most of the users here would have
There's two areas that you should look at, and one is under this reports and usage. And what this will show is who's using what. So this is our tenant, and we can look across the last, say, 90 days, and we can see email activity, Teams activity, OneDrive files, SharePoint files. If I come into this SharePoint files and drill in a bit further, I can see which sites and which sites are popular and who's using it. So that gives you a feel of actually what's being done. And 9 times out of 10, we'll come into this and the client will go, oh, we're not using Teams, we're not using XYZ. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, let's have a look. And sure enough, they are. So it allows you to figure out what's actually happening in your organization. Are you getting adoption of those products? Are people actually using it or not? And it's factual. The other one that's worth turning on is this new one called Productivity Score. And all the stuff's free and included with Office 365. So Productivity Score allows you to see how you're collaborating and how the team is working. So let's just see this come up. There we go. So it's going to give you a feel for your score of how you're communicating. So if I come in here, is it email? Is it chat? Community posts is Yammer. And how do you, what's happening? What's your collaboration on documents like? So are you actually working together on a document and creating documents? 83% of people attach physical files, or are you linking? So where are you doing that? People who use Office create files on OneDrive or SharePoint. Yeah. So you can start to see some really good information on who's doing what. It gives you a feel of, okay, what's happening.
That's some really good insights. And interestingly, we've been using another tool, like completely external, to see some sort of data insights on our team members' usage across their PCs. One of the issues that I've come across is, whilst we have a policy for not storing any documents on a PC directly, so nothing to be in your downloads, it still seems to happen. Is there any controls that you can put in place so that it forces people to save to a SharePoint site?
There's possibly some stuff there I wouldn't know. You could potentially do that, but you'd also want to turn on OneDrive backup so that even if it's been saved in the wrong spot, it's getting captured. And the other behavior thing you'd want to think about is that, remember the Swift thing is, okay, if we're downloading something from a Xero file or bank file, because you all deal with very sensitive information. So I don't know, if it's got a bank account number in it, what's your policy? Do you email bank account numbers back and forward internally or externally? And then you put on a policy to reflect that so that when you do email one, you get an alert or it doesn't allow it. So
yeah, for us, it's, I've been able to capture that somebody has been saving and not deliberately doing the wrong thing, but they're saving some documents to their desktop. And of course, my concern is, and it's happened in the past, is if that computer crashes, those documents are going to go. So what I was trying to circle back to is is there that control to stop people doing that?
So no, I'm not aware of that control, but I would turn on the backup. So if they do put it in the downloads, that folder gets backed up to the cloud anyway.
There's an app you could use, Carla, called Drop It, and you can actually tell it to, at different times a day or whatever, to run commands that you want to run. So you could actually make it sweep the desktop and move all the files into whatever location you tell it to do. And it's a free app. So it takes a little bit of getting your head around. I think there's another one called File Juggler, which does the same thing. That's a paid app.
Oh, thanks for sharing that, Carl, because that's definitely something that, whilst you can have policies and educate people, forming those habits is a little challenging sometimes. So definitely I'll look at those ones. Thanks for that.
While we're in the admin center, I just want to call out another thing, and I keep moving it on me, but it's a tool called Secure Score. So I've got it up on the screen here. And what that does is it gives you a score on how secure you are. So it rates you. So you get extra points if you've got two-factor on everybody. You get extra points. And there's a little bit of, if you've bought this security thing, you get more points, but it allows you to benchmark yourself. I think Heather, sorry, I'm picking on you, but it would be good to think about having that as a benchmark. If you're a bookkeeper or an accountant, what is the benchmark that you should expect for your secure score if you're in Office 365? It's a little personal, but that I'm trying to solve. Same with schools. What's the benchmark of where schools should sit in the security line? And
it'd be interesting to see across the database of bookkeepers, accountants that are using SharePoint, where we all sort of sit and collate that together. Maybe I'd create some sort of survey and collate that information. I'll take that on notice, but but so, it is an interesting point.
For schools as well, because then you get more points if you're doing things like you're using that tool to swap Swift numbers come out and things like that. So it starts to give you a feel for who's using stuff to make it secure, and then you start to set a benchmark. Just as I would assume Xero mandates that if you're using, you should have two-factor on your accounts, full stop.
Yeah.
So it's that type of level, but having that benchmark is quite useful.
Now we've gone over an hour and 20 now, and just so that we can get through everything that you wanted to cover, is there, because I have a few other questions here, and I'm sure there's a few questions from the guys still online.
Sure.
So
there's one area I just wanted to cover first, and then let's do questions. Yeah.
Sure. Sounds great.
So where is it? Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay. This one. So who uses Microsoft Teams?
Yep. Quite a few of us.
So you're either in Slack or Teams, or you're in both, as I am. So Teams is one of the fastest growing products. It's a three-headed beast. It's got chat type communication. It's a replacement for Skype for video calls like this. And it's also a window into your Office 365. So this is Teams. For those that haven't seen it before, Where's it gone? Up in the top left, we've got a rail with chat, Teams, calendar, and we've got files. So you can see here in this, this is just a screenshot. We've got conversations around topics, just like you would have in WhatsApp or Slack. And then we've got other tabs, and that's where I want to get to on this one, because the interesting thing here, where is it going? There we go, that's what I wanted to do, was that Teams and SharePoint are linked. Firstly, at that group level, if I create a Microsoft team, I'm actually creating a SharePoint site. I'm creating that house, just one of the feature sets is Teams. So you're buying, you buy a 4 wheels, you're actually getting a car and everything else with it. And when you create a channel in Teams, it actually creates a folder to put those files in SharePoint. There's a direct relationship between the two. We'll get to that in a second. So if I come out of here and back into this one. So remember we had created that file for in the general channel. We've got this team here called Workflow Max. And that's exactly the same. Let's just move this. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. You can tell I'm not a Zoom user enough to move the bits around. And Zoom's a cool tool as well. So if I come into the documents here, these documents are actually, those folders are the same channel names here. If I come into client A project, any files in here will sit in that location. So I'll see some in a second, hopefully. There we go. So remember that document that I put in as well. So there's this relationship between the two. So Teams, and people think, oh, Teams and SharePoint are different. They're not. SharePoint is the place where all files and Teams are stored. Remember that list that we had earlier? Let's come back to that general site. Now I might choose to actually post up here and add a tab. And I'm going to add a list tab. I think it's in here. I'm going to put it through a minute. Okay, I'm going to add a SharePoint tab, and I'm going to include, remember that WFM apps that we created earlier? I'm going to save that. So I've suddenly created this list of items, and I can do everything within Teams. And the bigger picture here I want you to think about is Microsoft wants you to open Teams in the morning before you open Outlook. And it's your window to everything. It's your browser to everything that's in SharePoint. You've just opened up this Teams app to do it, and that's what they're trying to achieve. So I can add lots of tabs across here. And everything that we worked on here is exactly the same. I'm using the Teams app as opposed to a browser. Does that, any questions on that? Who's a Teams user?
Yeah, I am, and a few others, and I think Cass's point there is, so the Teams view essentially is replacing the folder view and having to actually go within folders, because you can link everything back to Teams and sort of access what you need from there.
So the Teams, I guess Teams allows you to have a conversation a different way. So I can jump in here and discuss, add a document. I could browse to a recent document I've interacted with, which would be this one, and upload it. And we could have a discussion around it. So I'm just getting my work done in a conversational manner as opposed to sending emails and back and forth. So that's one part of Teams. And so you suddenly get into this habit of having conversations as opposed to sending back and forward. And the Files tab and the others, it's just where the documents live as a repository.
I just realised I was talking, but I muted myself. So, and so those documents are essentially links back to where they're stored on the SharePoint site, not separate versions. So if you were to open it there, you would just be working on a live document, yeah?
Now for those, Cassandra, this might be useful for those that are, come into the Files tab here. Maybe I've turned this off. I can't remember if I have. Oh yeah, where it says Add Cloud Storage here. Oh, look what's here. There's some other stuff, not just SharePoint. So I could add and have my Dropbox folder in here and interact with my files in Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever else I've got as well. So again, Microsoft is trying to make this as the program you open in the morning instead of Outlook.
No, I've seen Cass's face then, so I think she's pretty excited about that.
So that allows you to have a conversation around a file that's in Dropbox. Now, the uniques with the Microsoft land is that when it's in OneDrive, you can co-author and work together. Whereas, say, Dropbox, you can't co-author the document. When you're in Word desktop, you have to use as a Dropbox paper or whatever it is. It won't let you add OneDrive. Yes, it will. So OneDrive, remember OneDrive Personal, that's files that sit in your personal chat. So if I load up a file here, where is it going to go? It's my OneDrive, because chat is personal. Teams are conversations that you have out loud. Okay, so chat.
That's just given me clarity around that, because I could not work out why when I was in chat, why it would only go to the OneDrive and not to the other. Okay, thanks.
So chat is this, and what you need to be careful of here is if I come in and I'm going to create a new chat with myself, Lucy, and I'll go trainer Lucy and William, who's on our team. So I've created a group chat. That's not the same as a conversation in a team. Different thing. Conversation and team, we have different channels that we work in. Bear in mind also, if you're in a team, you can access any of these channels, just like you can access any of the files because you've got membership to the Workflow Max team.
Yeah, we made the mistake of once we sort of started working with Teams where we created the teams from within Teams. That makes sense. The channels within Teams. And then when we went to the SharePoint site, we've seen all of these extra groups. Yeah, and then realised that we'd actually duplicated because it was actually already in our SharePoint site. And then we could have filled it back this way.
Yeah, so it's working through how you want to approach it. And the other thing you can do, so say this general channel here, I've got files here which are related to the general channel. I can click up here and add a document library, and I'm going to choose our course manuals. So they're sitting in a different SharePoint site, and I'm going to come in, and so this was Workflow Max, so I wanted manuals. And now I've created a link out to where those files are elsewhere, and I can see all those as long as I've got permission. So I'm reliant on being a member of this group, and if I wasn't a member of where these files reside, I wouldn't see anything, or I might have different permissions. All you're doing is taking that content and embedding it into another tab. So you could put some more structure around, we put a bit of structure around our manuals, but you could point people to where those files are from this location. So that's another thing to consider.
It certainly is a massive beast of a machine once you get into all of this, and I think that I know so far that I've got a huge amount of clarity around some of the differences between OneDrive and SharePoint, and then just the extent to what SharePoint enables you to do. And it's sort of like there's a lot of people commenting around that they're a little bit mind blown, but I think that having that sort of overview of what's actually possible then gives you a starting point to go, okay, where do I what's possible, but like where do I start? And so I guess the question is, there's all of these things that can be done. What would you suggest is the starting point for somebody?
Sure. And then I see Amanda's question there around sharing external, which I think would be a good topic to cover off. So start and get familiar with using OneDrive. as a place for storing yourself, because the reason for that is you get used to the sharing controls, which we'll cover a bit for you, Amanda, in a second. So it allows you to work yourself. You've already got your mail in Office 365, and you get used to this sharing and co-authoring. You can share a few files with other people. And then Teams is useful for meetings. Obviously, it's going to appear, but once you start creating a team, you're creating shared places where people can put work in, and you've got to put a bit of thought around how you plan it. Think about using your channels. I guess a thing that we see that if a Teams deployment has gone off the rails a bit, there'll be massive amount of teams, but just one channel. So they've created lots of SharePoint sites when in theory, they could just create one team and have multiple channels for the different conversations around it. So if you're creating lots of teams and you're having the same people in it, in each team, stop and think and say, hey, actually, could I just do this with multiple channels?
Yeah, really good point. I've certainly been there and made those exact same mistakes. So I think that, yeah, for me, it was trial and error, but if you know from the outset of what not to do, it's definitely helpful.
And there is in the Office 365 admin area, there's a huge amount of, obviously, engage somebody to help you, but you've got to make the decision yourself as well. But there's a massive number of training guides and information there.
Yeah, that was a question asked. I can't remember by who, but some time ago, was how do you, because it's a lot to take in one hit, and obviously small chunks is probably a good way of doing it, but where to go to get sort of that self-paced learning.
Yeah, so in here, there's some great information. You can come into this training for admins, set up guidance, and work your way through. So there's everything here. This will guide you through that.
So good, yeah.
And it's changing all the time. That Microsoft's thrown a lot of support into here, and then get yourself educated in here, and then maybe it is bounce off what you think makes sense with an expert, and then go for it yourself from there. You don't go to a tax specialist if you don't know anything at the start with. You're normally going to get better value if you've educated yourself a bit and you're asking questions that they can add real value around.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is become familiar with some of the sort of basics, and then
The other thing I was going to call out was this, which is new. It might get you to,
got a lot of pondering faces on the screen right now. I can see that the wheels are ticking over in some of the brain's trust here.
I don't know if I can post this, can I? I'm not sure. Post to, there we go. That's it. So this is called Microsoft Learning Pathways. This is free. It's a free training site for people. So if I come into our one, I think I'd opened it up. Where have I gone? Orange Learning. That was it.
That looks really good.
So this is it here. So this is a training site with content, and you just turn it on and inject it into your Office 365. So if I come into, say, this Teams, what we've got on this, so we've added a banner and all the rest of it. We've added some of our own content on the left, but on the right, this is just generic content from Microsoft, from help.microsoft in here. But you can come into, if you really want to, and curate what playlists people see and put up your own content. If you've got some videos around Xero, you could actually create your own category. And you can say, okay, well, share files on OneDrive. No, we're not going to make that visible to people. Or yes, we are. So Learning Pathways is a free tool, and suddenly you've got a training intranet on your own organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you see, I'm not a control freak, but I do like to have controls and insights. So can you sort of control who is required to do what training, and then see if they've actually completed it? So if I'm talking about onboarding a new team member,
system.
Okay.
So it doesn't do that. It's think of it as just self-consumed videos. You could get to that, but you'd be better off doing that as a LMS.
Yeah. Okay.
Just done with, there's plenty of them out there, cloud-based ones. But this is a good place, and the beauty of this is that the content gets updated, because otherwise you're never going to keep pace. We had this great idea 2 years ago that we were just going to continue to produce new content every time Microsoft built stuff, and sell it, lots of money and all the rest of it. Then they come over the top with this, which is they've got the muscle to be able to create it. So our value is actually curating a learning path for people to be able to work through what makes sense at the right time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I've seen massive changes over the last sort of 4 months in particular in Microsoft Teams, some of the functionality in it, and it just seems like there's just loads more to come. So I know in our team we really enjoy using it and seeing what's new, and the team really grasp it really quickly. So yeah.
There was a question earlier around sharing, wasn't there? I'm just trying to remember who had that.
Yeah, I think that was Amanda. Yeah, she's waving. It was Amanda who.
Hey, Amanda. Starting SharePoint, and all the documents have been migrated from Dropbox. Is that it? I have 6 documents that I've prepared today for a dozen clients, and I want to share it.
Yeah, so I've prepared them in OneDrive. I've got them in OneDrive, so they're sitting in OneDrive at the moment. Literally, I started using this today. So I prepared it in OneDrive, and I'm sitting here like I'm calling it like a Spring 2020 Vault. And so now I want to share it with people, but I want them, they're all unrelated parties, and I want them to use the documents to put their own figures in, for instance. So I don't want them to share them back to each other. It's just a mechanism to get them out in one go.
Okay. So I've just created a folder here. I've called it 1.1, so hopefully we get it at the top of this list. There we go.
Yeah.
So I've got a couple of options. I can click here and share, and what I'm going to do there, I'm going to share the folder. So that's not necessarily what I want to do, but let's do this. This is always fun. I'm going to come into the folder. I'm going to create a new, we'll go with an Excel workbook. This is a fun game. In a second.
I love the passion that you've got for this. You're like, this is fun. You obviously play with this a lot. I haven't seen that happen before. This is new.
You can save it. So I've created the document. I'm going to close out of that, and we're going to cover sharing. There. And so I've got a document here, and I think it'll change its name now, hopefully to where are you? Yeah, perfect. Select it. I'm going to press share. Now, the share button's everywhere. It's the top right in Office and all the rest of it. So I've got a couple of options. First of all, I can choose to share with anyone with the link. So what does that mean? Anyone with the link to this file. And I'm going to copy the link. Can access it. They don't need to sign in. So while I'm doing this, if you click on that link that's in the chat, stick your name and where you are. Okay, so you can work, so anybody can access that. Now, that's not going to work for you, Amanda. What you want to do is share and choose a specific person. Okay, so you put in whatever their name is. I'm going to put my... And it's going to send them an email, and only they can click on that one file. So you'd have to do that individually with each file. Okay. And that would then give them access to it. Now, there's a couple other things that you can do as well. If I exit out of this and hit share, I might choose, okay, so people that you specify, and notice to get to this, I clicked in the middle here, and I might say, actually, they can't edit it and they can't download it. So they can just view it. So you've got that control.
That is a fun exercise that you've put up.
There you go. So you can see, you can see lots of people are working in that file at the same time. There's not too many, but you see you haven't had to access that file. You haven't had to sign in or anything. That's an open link.
Yeah.
What I think in your scenario, Matt, is you would want to name the people.
Yeah. So, but would it be also advisable, like, because I'd like them all to have their own folder. So at the moment in Dropbox, they all had their own folder.
So I would,
but I just,
yeah, correct. I would create it. I would actually, because that's just one file. If it was multiple files, I would do it at the folder level.
yeah, see, I've got six files in the one folder. So I've got a folder with 6 files in it.
Yep. And you want everybody, okay, so then perhaps you then create another folder underneath for Mary.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. So, and would I copy them all in there? So everyone would have a copy in each one of those, or could I just?
What's the file? Is it?
There's a couple of PDFs, there's an Excel, and there's a Word document.
And they're generic when they're sharing, but they are personal when they send them back?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's another feature in here called, where is it? When I click on this folder, see this request file? So you have to click on a folder. And what that does, request stuff, please. And if I copy this link and drop it into, there we go, we'll drop it in here. And you could upload a file that way. Or you could send it via email. So if I click, let me just have a look. If I click on that link, it's not going to work for me, but it'll ask me to upload a file and it would give me permission. So if you've got a file there, Mary, mentioned to see, you would just upload a file, but only that file would only be shared with myself and the person that uploaded it. The others wouldn't see it. So I would explore that upload file option, because then you have a folder with, you'd share the folder with them all and say, hey, here you go, put stuff in here. And here's a link that I want you to upload it. So download it from here, make your changes, and then upload from there. Yeah,
okay. Thank you. Thanks, David. Cool. That's great.
Oh, there we go. So, and you can see I told you that was fun on the thing. Now, what I can do, I'm not going to, but if I come back into my OneDrive here, so this where are you file, if I hover over it, I can see, 3 views. I've got a whole lot of information that's coming in on it. But also if I click here and click on share, actually I'm going to do this. Up into the 3 dots, manage access. I'm going to spoil the fun here. And I can come in and I could turn it off. Yeah, I'd have to break the link, but I could also switch it. If I'd named the people, I could say, in fact, I'll do that. I'll delete the link now. And so now, look, thanks for your contribution. But now if you try and update anything in that document, you can't. If you press refresh on your browser, it's gone.
Oh, it's gone.
Sorry.
That was fun. So you could essentially, I'm just thinking about a work case where it maybe wasn't just fun like that, but you could send some feedback, or put your changes to this document and put a deadline on it, and then once that deadline is gone,
there's a bill somewhere.
Yeah, see where it says.
But that's okay. I'll look to.
Yeah, thanks,
You
Andy.
could also go, hey, this expires. This is the price for these products, and it's valid until this date, and then after this date it goes.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Good use case.
So that's sharing, but yeah, I think in your land, I would explore the request files feature, because that's really useful, because you send somebody a link and you say, hey, put it here.
Yeah, so something that we've done similar to what Amanda was saying, but like, say for instance, we're doing a conversion, we'll actually just create a new folder for a copy of their backup if they're moving from one, like a desktop product, to the cloud, and we will just share them the link to that folder where they can then upload their document rather than requesting it. We just give them the link and say pop that
It's the same
backup
thing.
in there.
The advantage of the request a link is that I have to check, or you'd have to check, but I believe that link, I could put the link there, and I can give this a go. If that link that I put in the chat, if somebody loaded up a file in there to that link, just something obviously non-sensitive, it will only, so because I've sent the one link to everybody, but it will be, the permissions on it will be just the person that uploaded it and me. So you could have you could have a link on the bottom of your email signature with send me your files, just click this link and follow. And it'll put it there, but it won't give permission to other people, if that makes sense. So that could be a useful way of doing it.
Okay, and do you have anything more you need to cover off on your presentation, David?
That was pretty much it. Let's have a look and see. I think that was pretty much it. You could go on for hours. We're not going to. Stage 2.
Well, that's what happens in these groups. There is lots of interest and questions and feedback. So I
Let's see what other questions we've got.
Yeah, I thought we might go.
Sandra, have a good dinner.
Yeah, a few people going to have dinner, so we understand you might need to leave us now.
I just had a quick question. You know when you were on the Windows Explorer earlier and you had those SharePoint locations, does that work with Macs as well?
Yep, works fine with Macs. The later version of the OS, but yeah, the files on demand.
Okay.
Yep, files on demand works for Mac now too.
Got a question from Nathan there. I'm not sure if Nathan's online if he wants to ask his question out loud, but feel free to unmute yourself and jump on and ask your question, Nathan. Otherwise, there we go.
I'm still here. Is that working?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I was just wondering if anyone's using Teams and using FYI docs. A couple of people noted that they were using Teams and having separate client area in Teams for each client. If you're using FYI docs or not using FYI docs, I wanted to know how that kind of compares as far as your storage and tracking and keeping client data. I'm guessing no one uses FYI docs.
Yeah, is there anybody in the group that uses FYI docs? Doesn't look to be the case there, Nathan. Sorry about that.
One thing, just so Nathan, looking at my screen here, see where it says apps that I'm about to click on. These are all the apps that you can integrate with Teams. I don't know FYI docs, but there's so many in here.
FYI docs uses Microsoft SharePoint as the back end.
Right.
So it could be.
So so they would be residing in a SharePoint site somewhere or other.
Yep.
Yeah. So you can see you can add lots of different apps into Teams as well, which is a conversation for another day. But yeah, it certainly does. Simon Hopper, can you delete a SharePoint site? Yep, you can. You have to be the admin to do that. You can delete the files within it, and remember the analogy with Steve-O, the Garbo, and how that works as well. And if you hadn't joined from there, you're going to have to fast forward back to the start to watch that one.
Is there anybody else that wants to just unmute and ask any questions at this point?
Yes, please.
Yeah, fire away.
Can I just ask, Planner versus Asana, we were also talking about tasks earlier, so Carla was talking about tasks and we got a little bit off topic with it. Can we go back to that and just have a look, see how you can do tasks within SharePoint versus having Asana? Is it the same theory or?
How's Asana spelled?
ASANA. Oh, yeah, there.
That's it there. So you could embed Asana, I'm assuming, into SharePoint if you wanted to, and work within that, or.
Do you find Planner's just a bit like a poor cousin of Asana?
Yeah. And that will happen is that Planner's free and included with Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a market for an Asana and other tools that you pay for, because and they always need to be better than the product there. It's the same with the the Xero product, and I don't know, invoice scanning. They've got some features with expenses, but there's better apps out there that do it, but you pay for them. So there's always going to be this race to which is the better product, and Asana needs to be better than what you get internally. The advantage of here, see this new plan, so I could create plan. I can now jump into Microsoft Planner, and I've got a plan sitting here. Now, the beauty of this is that, remember, this is a group. We've got 3 members of our organisation. Who's in it? Nadine, Coach, and myself. So I can assign Nadine a task. Whoops.
So do you use this for your own business?
Yeah, to a degree. And yeah, we do. We use this in Workflow Max, and we jump back between the two.
We use Planner for special projects. So say if we're looking at rolling out a new tool or app or researching, or so it's more internal projects. Yeah.
I think that's where we're getting to as well. If it's a client-based project where we're billing and doing activity, Workflow Max or Practice Manager just makes sense using the tasks and tabs in that tool because you're centric to there. If it's an internal-based activity, then there's no time recorded, and it's not, you're not tracking it in the same way, then Planner works well. Now, I know that's the thing I was going to say here. So on the external, so we've shown how we can share documents externally. I can also come into a SharePoint site and add members. Now, I could add guests, so I could add somebody outside the organisation to this SharePoint site. So then suddenly they become a member of the location, and they can do everything that other people can do. So they can suddenly participate in the plans and all the rest of it. So you've got to think, I don't know, you could add, for every conversion, you could create a SharePoint site and use the Teams chat functionality in Planner and invite the client in. And so you're all working in one big house. Or you could do it in different ways. The way we operate is if it's a big enough project, it's a 6-month training project, and it's a chunky project, then yeah, we'll create it gets its own house and the client gets invited in. If it's just a small project for a small engagement for a week or a few days, it's not worth going to that effort to build the house, build the SharePoint site.
Thank you for that.
No worries. I've got a few more questions here coming through. Fire away.
Emma, if I have a client who has an Excel spreadsheet we currently share via Google Sheets, but can I now share this via Office 365 with the client? Yeah, absolutely. So you don't have that conversion from an Excel sheet into a Google Sheet. You just save it into you've got to save it into your OneDrive or SharePoint, and you go from there.
Yeah.
And Nathan, you've got another question there?
Yes, sorry, just circling back to my FYI Docs question. So the main reason I was interested in FYI Docs is it captures all your emails and stores it in a central location.
Right.
Mostly so that your team can access it if your client queries come in, documents come in, pulls all the documents out. Is there something like that within Teams or SharePoint or?
No, so Suite Files does similar as well, I think. No, so they're products that are built on top of the SharePoint framework, or built on top of SharePoint and adding value from there.
Yeah, okay. No, that's all right. Thanks.
Is there any other questions? Sorry, Mark.
I've got a question on integrating OneNote with Microsoft Teams. I wanted to share, so I put all my minutes with clients in OneNote. I tried to integrate it into Teams, link it into Teams. Nobody in my team could access it. Is that because OneNote is linked to my OneDrive, or do I need to create like a team?
Okay. Yeah. So if I come up here, click, and OneNote, it's going to say, so look at my notebooks, and what have we got here? So I'm Cloud at the moment as this person. So this Workflow Max notebook, that's going to be visible to everybody who's a member of the site. But if I grab one of these, a personal coach one, I'll be able to see it because I'm coach and I can see it. But others within the team of the 3 people, if they haven't been shared that OneNote, they won't be able to see it. So you'd need to go back to where that OneNote sits, file, edit it, and then make sure it's shared with the other people. So you go back, find it in your OneDrive and make sure it's shared. And you can actually, if I come into the OneDrive for this one, I'll do it this way. My notebooks. What was it called? iPad training, I think. Too many. Anyway.
So you could share a specific notebook with people in your organization.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you just find a mixture on this one. Here's a different one. And I would just, where is it gone? No. I just hit the share button in the OneNote file. Yeah.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you. That's great.
And you can share to the group, not just the people. So I would do it that way, because that means if you add somebody else to that group, they'll automatically pick up the ability. Best practice in that one, it's pros and cons. Best practice down the track would be to create a OneNote and just use the shared OneNote where it resides in the SharePoint site.
Good point. Thank you.
We've got a few people dropping off because we are coming up to the 2-hour mark. We did expect this was going to be a pretty jam-packed session. But one of the things I thought I would just, we can obviously ask more questions if need be, but I guess from those that are still left online, that what they would want, what you would want from an educational point of view for SharePoint. I think there was some discussion there about, meetups and bite-sized chunks and talking through it and that sort of thing. I guess it's, if anybody's got any comment on what they would be looking at for assistance in education and training around SharePoint, and even assistance with setup, and what David, you might be able to offer and help out with there.
Yeah, sure. So there's as many user groups on Microsoft product as there are on Xero. There's probably more. So there's certainly local meetups and other things to go to learn on various areas. And you can either go technical, so there's lots of meetups. And the beauty at the moment is they're all online. So you can go to wherever they are. But there's a good one, I think, in Melbourne, and there's plenty around. So that allows us a topic, say if you got really excited about the Power Apps and Flow area, that's where you'd go to learn more and share stories on how you can go from there. If you are just learning around, want to learn around how to use the tool further, there's some good Microsoft content. There's plenty of training companies out there, ourselves included, that can guide you through that spot. There's a couple of good there were a couple of good conferences. So Microsoft run an Inspire. It was my last trip to Australia, actually. In February was Microsoft Inspire in Sydney, and that was really good because you can spend some time with the product team. So think of it like a XeroCon. So that was good if you wanted to have part of this as well. I think there's an interesting space if you are a bookkeeper, accountant, cloud advisor, integrator, to bring Office 365 or Google Docs into your sphere, and you're gonna butt up against the IT support people on site support. But as a bookkeeper or an accountant, you don't need an on-site support provider to look after Xero. It's an interesting spot when everything else is in the cloud. If it's Google Docs or if it's Office 365, it's certainly a tool that you could include as part of your sphere of expertise, as you are in apps as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I know we've sort of guided a number of our clients in to the SharePoint or to the Office suite of products. They've got access to a lot of the tools are just there within their subscription, and they just don't know they exist. They go and get an Office 365 subscription, but they've got all of these tools. But instead of going and they go and add all these additional apps, Calendly is a good example. That's got a place, and it's a great tool, but a lot of users don't realize that they've got Microsoft Bookings or things like that. And so we have sort of built into a lot of our conversations with our clients exactly that, but don't specialize it in us as ourselves. We refer on or find somebody that can help them out.
But there's a really interesting spot is that you're having the conversation around cloud, productivity, etc. Not my computer's broken, how do I fix it? And so you're in a really good spot. They're trying to automate stuff, and that might be using Microsoft Forms, using Sway, doing exactly what we showed within OneDrive or Bookings. So knowing the capability of the tool, and especially in those apps, I'd say Sway, OneNote, Bookings. There'll be a couple others. Will add value to your position as a cloud apps advisor or a business advisor or whatever you want to call it.
And from what ripped orange, I keep thinking it's ripe orange, like a ripe orange, but it's ripped orange. A very interesting name, I thought. From what you guys do to assist.
So. First up, we're not a support company. So our ethos is to engage people, to train them so they can become self-sufficient, and that works well for most clients. For some it doesn't, but for a lot it does. And so that may be running a session like this on coaching them on how they can formulate how to set up their Office 365. Yeah, we can do the technical heavy lifting in the background if they want to, and we've implemented it for a variety of companies up and down New Zealand. Remotely, there's nothing to stop that happening anywhere in the globe. But it's allowing them to understand it and release the power of what's in the tool, and that's training, that's coaching, it's a variety of other things. So that's an area that we focus on. The other thing that we are really good at is on bending Word and Word templates. Think Workflow Max templates, think Xero templates, or anything in between the two. So we do a lot of that. The other area that's interesting in this space is when you start connecting, say, Power BI, which is a business analysis tool we haven't talked about, maybe that's one for another day, into Xero or Workflow Max so you can visualize data. So think there, if you're pulling stuff out and pulling it into Excel and doing wonderful stuff there, you can turbocharge that by putting it into Power BI.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. A lot of people have said that, that it's wow, this is overwhelming because there's so much to take on, and just Power BI in itself, it's certainly an area that that would definitely be a session. And I think that what I'm guessing from the users that are interested in this is that maybe just breaking it down into what are each of the tools that are available, how do they talk to the other tools, what do they sort of used for. And I think that what is best practice that you've seen for bookkeepers and accountants alike, that what's the sort of ideal structure, what's the ideal tools, what are the number one things that need to, and then sort of build out from there.
We do those discovery sessions where we'll come in and give people an overview of all the tools and then quickly triage the ones that make sense. From there.
No, that's really interesting. Maybe we can do something similar to this, but a little bit more focus session on some of those key areas, a bit shorter, so that we can kind of get our heads around it. So if anybody that's joined today that sort of now gets an overview of what SharePoint looks like, what it does, that might not have been familiar, can sort of delve a little bit more into each area.
And I saw that when the question was SharePoint, I'm going, well, SharePoint's just this bit of it. We need to go wider and then we come back in.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Space. So certainly, one specifically on Power BI, or even what you can do with Microsoft Forms to automate and have clients fill in. And Microsoft, actually, she's still there, man. You can create a Microsoft form with an upload document. So you could just send a client a link, say, here you go. And here's an upload document form, and they just fill it in and put it in. So you can automate that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Really exciting.
If there's any other final questions that you want to throw out now, let us know. Anybody that has anything they want to ask? No, I think that's a wrap, David. Thank you so much for your... thanks so much for your time. That was a great session. I've got lots of thumbs up and huge amount of kudos in the chat there. So I think
I've got one, Carla.
Oh no, actually we're just going to leave now. See you, bye. No,
hey, Chris. Hey, so just referring back to you guys saying it's overwhelming. Yeah, like you pretty much need to talk to 5 Microsoft guys before you understand the basics of it, I found. And, you know, like this is coming from like our IT guys and clients, and Karina, one of our staff members' husband, is essentially Mr. Microsoft for Southeast Queensland. So like, you know, you got to talk to all of them because they're all coming from like they all come from like a different technical background, but like, or they've got like a different business automation approach. So like, you know, you talk to the IT guys and they're like, oh, this is good for IT. And you're like, I don't want to know about that IT stuff. I'm a small business process guy. Tell me how it works from that point of view. It's like, yeah, you have to hear it multiple times from multiple aspects before it really makes sense. And yeah, yours was good today, David. Thanks.
Yeah, and you do have to, you know, there's so many apps out there. You'll get different opinions on whether X, Y, and Z is right. You need to inform yourself and then make a decision from there.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really good, and I think that practical examples are where I know for me, I take on that that information better, and also actually using something and actually playing with it. So I hope that we can maybe do some more around this side of things, and then do some more shorter sessions and a little bit more focused points. So thank you again, David. Well, I'm going to call it a wrap now. Thanks everybody for coming along today, and thanks for your time, David, and everyone for their questions.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you, David. That was awesome.
Thanks, Carla. Thanks, David.
No worries, guys. Thanks for all of the love in the chat. I'm feeling on a bit of a high now, so I can thanks, Ma. I can finish the day feeling all warm and fuzzy.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thanks, guys.